question number one, how did the ability to travel in spirit unfold for you? And what role does it play in your life and with your work to help others?
The way it unfolded for me, it began very simply in the beginning with spontaneous experiences, out-of-body experiences, that where you would just start learning with things like how to move around in the spiritual realm. You had to learn how to see, how to hear from the consciousness rather than from physical organs. You have to learn how to move in a different way because you're moving through thought. And then you go through a lot of different procedures that the spiritual world actually took me through to teach me how to travel to higher and higher realms, and also into lower realms where I worked with souls who were in purgatorial or hellish states. And so it's something that occurs over a great deal of time. You learn to travel a whole bunch of different corridors and tunnels, because there's tunnels through time, there's tunnels through dimensions, there's tunnels that take you into lower spheres, there's tunnels that take you into higher spheres, there's tunnels that take you into worlds of creation, there's tunnels that take you into the past, into the present, and that, you know, so there's a lot of things that go on, and that all goes into the way parallel worlds and you know, even some of this quantum astrophysics that's coming out now, where they're talking about the multi-universe. So in the spiritual experience, you're learning how to, you know, navigate and travel through the multi-universe, which is a series of realms that all overlap one another, and yet they're also very different vibrationally in terms of the higher you go, it's a much higher, finer frequency. The lower you go, it's less so. And the lower you go, the more weighted your soul is. The higher you go, you can't go unless you discard weight from your soul. So there's a whole lot of different processes, initiations, rites of passage that take you into learning how to make these travels. And it affects your life profoundly in pretty much every way, because it ends up guiding your journey here as well. You know, the experiences are going to show you how you need to proceed forward in this world. It's going to show you things that you need to see, which ironically is one of the things that relates back to Emanuel Swedenborg. Emanuel Swedenborg seemed to have a very profound understanding of energetic truth, is the word I use for it. He had other words for it, but he had this ability to see into the spirit world and understand what things were from God's vantage point rather than from our limited one. And that's what these journeys have done in my life, is to give me a much broader perspective of what's going on around me. How am I going to make my choices based on what things really are versus what I might have thought they were? And in terms of helping other people, it's truly limitless. You know, I do a lot of work with people in their afterlife journeys as they're crossing over from this realm to the next. And it's limitless in the fact that you're literally helping people go from, you know, this physical realm through, usually, most people will go through a lot of purification stages after they cross over and into these other realms. And some people will stay in, you know, kind of a median state for a while. Some people will be able to purify and go a little bit higher. And some people don't do that. Some people go into the hell realms as well. What we're given by having this gift is the ability to go in and actually alter the path that somebody might be taking, and to assist them in taking a step higher towards God. Now, this can happen in any number of ways. It can happen through, you know, souls that are just crossing over who need assistance in adjusting from the physical to the spiritual life. But you also have souls who are, you know, coming from not a very good place, not a very good understanding. you know, a lot of souls cross over very confused in terms of what reality really is. And again, that takes you back to Swedenborg and why his works are so important. Because what Swedenborg does for us is he allows us to see our physical reality here and what's happening on the ground from the standpoint of how God sees it and how it appears through the lens of virtue and vice, in a way that we are not able to do without the assistance of the Holy Spirit. And Emanuel Swedenborg did that in such a profound way in his writings. That's what makes it so important. That's part of the reason why so many people will cross over with a great deal of delusion intact, is because there is so much time spent in this world on, you know, wasting time, not recognizing there's a purpose here. There's something we have to achieve in the short time that we will live in this realm. And so a lot of materialistic or worldly pursuits end up totally, completely keeping people away from the actual purpose of their visit here, which is spiritual. And so a great deal of souls cross over in a very deluded state. And Swedenborg talks about that a lot in Heaven and Hell, the deluded states that we can all be in when we cross over. And that's one of the great gifts of that particular book, because it allows us to see through so many lenses the various ways that we could enter into a state of, you know, delusion, self-delusion, or delusion that comes from the world itself that could really trip us up in this life and the next in ways that are really, you know, not good for us, that would take us backwards, and that are just not a good thing for us to do. And it allows us to reevaluate the way that we're thinking, the way that we're viewing things. It gives us a window into our own souls as to where we might not be seeing things more clearly. But when you go into these states with souls who have either crossed over in the afterlife, or souls who are, you know, many people will have spiritual experiences or out-of-body experiences in their sleep. They may not be aware of it. Some of them are, some of them are not. But most people have them. And ironically, it is during that time that, you know, God's angelic realm is really hard at work on the subconscious of humankind. That's when alterations are being made that that affect the way we might move our thoughts forward towards something Godward versus backwards. And that is, you know, that is the time when those kinds of alterations are made. And in the mystical realms, that's one of the things that we are called to do among many. There's such an infinite number of jobs to do in the mystical realms. It's really hard to encapsulate them. But there's all sorts of things that have to do with, first of all, you want to bring people up from a lower state of vibration into, you're trying to bring the frequency up so that they can become capable of higher understanding, higher knowledge, and higher action. You're trying to bring up understanding. You're also trying to bring up things that might be holding them back physically. So there's all sorts of things that are going on. When you're dealing with souls in the lower realms, what you're doing is looking for a split second where a soul has a sincere moment of really regretting and wanting to take a different path. And that's when God will send souls in, mystical travelers like myself or others, to go in and assist them in taking whatever that very next step is. So as you can see, if there are an infinite number of hell realms, an infinite number of heavenly realms, and there's an infinite number of, you know, purification realms, and the purification realms are where we go in the middle, where we're trying to make ourselves more compatible to the all-holy God, you know, because we're nowhere close. And so we go through lots of rites of passage, initiations into mysteries, and also just this constant like whittling away. You know, you imagine Michelangelo with the stone. That's what's happening with us. You know, we're whittling away at our vices, our self-deceptions, things we don't understand properly, things we don't see in the proper light of God, all those kinds of things, so that we can go to a higher sphere. One of the things that I have experienced that I recall reading in Swedenborg's writings as well, that I think is really important for people to understand, is when you try to go to a higher vibrational sphere than you are able to go to, than you are compatible to. You know, Swedenborg talks about the compatibility issue. If you try to go to a realm that is not compatible to you yet, it's too high for you, you will feel as if you are being physically crushed, because you have to be vibrationally able to go there. Swedenborg talks about that. He also talks about the way the realms are guarded in that way by the angelic. But this is such an important thing, because it's like, well, why do you have to do all that? It's like, well, because we go where we're compatible. And so we have to actually do the work that is required of us to become compatible to these things of a higher nature and God's holy light and his love and wisdom, which go so far beyond, you know, the human world is, you know, right here. And, you know, God's world is so much bigger. And so we have to start tinkering away at those worldly, materialistic, grounded perceptions that literally hold us to the ground. It weighs our soul down. We cannot fly higher because we are unwilling to work towards those things that will actually lift us up into the air. And, you know, I mean, ironically, that's what Emanuel Swedenborg had to have done this, you know, in his life, to have the astonishing visions that he experienced, and the insights that were poured into him from the Holy Spirit. He had to have gone through a purification experience like this in order to become able to receive it. And that's kind of what, you know, I'm trying to teach other people to do. We have a lot of people that come and read my books and stuff, and that's what they learn how to do. They learn how to become receptive to the process. Because, you know, a lot of times people misunderstand that, you know, it's like, okay, well, I've wasted so much time. I've done this, I've done that. But the reality is, if you decide right now, in this instant, I'm getting on the boat, I'm doing it, you have done it. You've started the path, because the journey is the path, and you're going to take that journey. And it's really that simple. If you sincerely mean it and you take that step, that's going to change everything. It literally alters energetically the forward thrust of your entire life. And so it's not a difficult thing to do, because we forget about how powerful God's mercy is and how God reaches to us in such a manner as to make it so simple for us to turn to him, that we, you know, we think, well, you know, I've done these things, I've done those things. And it's like, no, it's really that simple. You just make a decision. I'm on the boat, I'm taking it. Everything changes in a split second.
So you mentioned heaven and hell, and some things you thought were good about that. Maybe you've said, you know, enough about it, or maybe you have another thought. But just wondering, yeah, why heaven and hell, and then why marriage, love? Why do you feel like if you're starting people on Swedenborg, why are those two important?
Okay, the reason I'm going to start with marital love first. You know, I do recommend both heaven and hell and marital love in the course of study that we offer on our website for free for people to take. And the reason that we do that is, we'll start with marital love. Marital love is the only book of its kind written in the history of humankind. That's why. But I'm going to give you a little bit more to go on that. You know, this book is so phenomenal in that it lays out the mystery of marriage, the mystery of male-female relationships, and the underlying energetic truth behind the interaction that occurs between a man and woman in holy matrimony. There is nothing else on this planet that I have heard of, and I have looked, trust me, I have looked. There is nothing like it. You know, Swedenborg is taken into every possible situation you could think of. And you know, what's fascinating about it is Swedenborg wrote all this stuff hundreds of years ago, but it is so relevant. It is no less relevant today than it was when he wrote it. It completely alters, you know, when you're reading Marital Love, it literally alters the energy of how you perceive your own marriage and how you perceive marriage. And I've seen this happen not just with myself and my own husband, but with hundreds of other people, because I recommend it to everybody who's having marital problems. And I do not recall a single one where reading Marital Love did not completely save their marriage. You know, even if their marriage was imperfect, they were able to recognize where their imperfections lay and work on them, but also understand there's a greater picture going on here. You know, when Emanuel Swedenborg talks about how marriage is, you know, occurs in this world and then how it transitions into the next, and how the married couple, if they are truly living together in love and wisdom and light together, become one angel, is something that only Swedenborg has described. And there is no other book on this earth that that teaches about this holy sacrament that most of us will have to deal with sometime in our life. Most of us have this, you know, issue in a manner that completely takes the secular, the materialistic, the worldly, the selfish, the, you know, all these things out of it. And it infuses the spirit into the experience of marriage in a way that it completely alters it. And I don't think anyone can read that book without being completely altered. Truly, it changes the way you see your marriage. It changes the way you see yourself and how you view the importance and the journey of your marriage in this life. Now, you know, when you go into heaven and hell is truly like one of those essential texts. You know, heaven and hell is something that I think every human being should read. And if they don't, I think they're missing out on a lot, because what Emanuel Swedenborg really accomplishes here in ways that go beyond anything you can explain, you have to read it and experience it to fully understand. He takes us into not just the overt things about our character, but he goes into all these subtle aspects of everything that we may be struggling with. And he shows us how that looks in the spirit world. And it is, I can, you know, as a mystic too, I can say that is absolutely how it appears. One of the things that is so fascinating too is that Swedenborg is able to capture not only all of our virtues and our vices and how they manifest and how they look as we cross over into the worlds of spirit, but he's also able to show us our own self-deception, in all of those things. But also he talks about in great depth and over again in many instances about how the person who may be living and appearing to the higher worlds like a demon does not see it that way. They don't see it. And this is where the, you know, the real crux of our self-deception and self-delusion gets stuck, because, you know, we forget, okay, yeah, you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to look the same. It doesn't mean the essence of your soul has not altered. The essence of who you are may have very well altered, and it may not be something that you would be real pleased with. But what Emanuel Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell really does for every one of us, it takes you into every possible human interaction, human problem, big, small, in the middle. And it literally is a dissection of your soul where you can take it apart and put it back together in a way that is more pleasing to God and that will be more pleasing to you in the end, because we always forget that what is pleasing to God is always pleasing to love itself, which is what we're all seeking. We forget that those things that we don't see clearly are not things that we carry with us because they're just goods in themselves. They're not. We carry them because we think they're good. We don't even often recognize the negative things that are happening or the things that will continue to happen or will happen down the road, even in eternity, as a result of things we refuse to look at. We don't recognize that what is underneath is more important than what is on the surface. So Heaven and Hell is just an essential text that everyone should read. I mean, it's like an essential text of humanity. If you want to understand what is your purpose here on earth, what am I supposed to be doing while I'm here in this world? You know, it's kind of confusing at times to people because it's, you know, we're here for a short time. We know that it's temporary. What are we supposed to be doing? A lot of people feel this confusion. This is the sort of thing we should be doing, is taking this, because we're trying to make ourselves over in the image of God. And that is what Emanuel Swedenborg's visions were always about, is understanding what things are from the standpoint of how God and the higher heavens see them. And we want to know that because that is highly educational for us in our human spirits, so that we can move higher and hopefully move closer to God and his will for us.
Oh yeah, that pumped me up. That was awesome.
I hope so.
You just said everything so well, and I just obviously I love hearing people lit up about Swedenborg's books, and you just did that really well. So
I appreciate you letting me talk about the books, because I wanted to talk about those books, because those are I think they're really important. You know, I mean, yeah, they really are.